This is the 1 litre turbo diesel engine that was reconditioned by Cork Engine Centre, and it's ready to go back into the Charade. Unfortunately, I've had it back an awful long time and it's actually aged in storage, but everything should be just as good as new inside, and I'm really looking forward to hearing it inside and Chewy here.
This is Chewy's head, about to get skimmed. This is where they take a tiny layer of metal off the bottom to give it a face like new to meet up with the block. They also skim the block. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to film the entire process as I did with my Cadet engine, but we do have these few nice shots for the record. That's the block after being done. They've done a lovely job cleaning up the oil pump end of things, and that's the little 3-cylinder engine's pistons going up and down. So back in my garage, I've got to clean up the cross member. I've decided that unlike the process I did to take it out, where I raised the car and dropped it to the ground, still using my hoist, this would have been simulating the way the engine was originally made. I've decided to go in over the top with the engine, but that means I need to put the cross member and a few of the other mountings on from below after dropping the engine and gearbox over the top. I'm taking that mounting off the gearbox, and that needs a little bit of a clean up. That would look very rusty in the corner of the engine bay, so I was to leave it like that. I'm going through these jobs really quite quickly because I want to push on with Chewy, so I'm actually painting these while preparing to put everything in. I did notice that tin plate on the end of the gearbox looked horrible, so I had to clean that up as well. I'm not too fussy. I'm not going to paint the gearbox itself. I don't mind a bit of patina as long as it looks aluminium, but that tin piece looked terrible. So I gave these guys a coat of the zinc primer and then a top coat of gloss black. They're from mixgarage.com. You can check out my affiliate code there in the description. So I'm actually masked up here because the paint is still fresh in the room, and I'm just doing my best to keep my hands off the freshly painted area. It's had a few minutes already to dry a bit. So lift that up onto the engine, and it's actually quite light, and it's slotted in quite easily to the clutch, getting in that first important bolt on the top. Then using my Hikoki impact gun from efox.ie, I have a lot of heavy duty bolts to do when fitting up the engine, so it's nice to speed the process along with this. Now I only go to the first click, and then I still like to tighten everything by hand just to get a feel for everything. At least here the bolts are going into steel, but you'd want to be careful if they're going into aluminium. That's the starter motor. It's handy to get all these done while you've got plenty of space around the engine. This mounting, I haven't actually freshly painted this, but actually my wife and I, when we got the car for her originally, she was doing her driving lessons in it about 5 or 6 years ago. We actually took that off and painted it back then. It's had a few scratches, but it's earned that patina. With the engine going in over the top, this one will be able to slide down into its mounting on the body, but all the other mounts are removed. Having said that, you can see the front one is still there. That'll fit too. These are ones to be careful with because they are going into the aluminium head. So a manual squeeze at the end. So using my hoist now to lift the engine and gearbox up. Just have to get them higher than the front panel of the Charade. I finish off my painting now. Another bit of black on that. So just gently push the car in underneath that, and then I can lower it down into position. It's a bit crooked, but the main thing is to make sure it doesn't hit anything on the way in. And then I'm leveling it up with the jack, and it's pivoting that mounting down into place. A few little adjustments there with the hoist, and that's a pretty good landing. Just like getting on the gearbox, and the first engine mounting you get a bolt into is always a relief. So I take off my straps. It's handy using the ratchet strap, because I tie up the back one, but with the front one being on the ratchet, I was able to adjust the angle, and at least it was level front to back going in. Although, as you saw, it went with the gearbox in particular, it hung down a lot to the right, but that was fine. I used an old alternator bracket to go into 2 bolt holes I saw at the back of the head, and I just adjusted that out with spacers, so that gave me something safe to grab onto, that I wouldn't harm anything delicate on the back end of the engine there. So then I transferred the straps around the starter motor to hold up the gearbox end, so I could remove the jack, and then I could go in with the gearbox mounting. Remove my masking tape there. Crudely done, but it did the job. And I think I needed to lower it a bit in order to get enough space to get the bolt holes, which are on the bottom of the gearbox. So just adjusted that there, and then I was able to get that plate on. I'm glad I painted those. It would have looked rough otherwise. So get that bolt through the inner wing and tighten it up. So now it's held left to right, and I've jacked up the whole car and lifted the engine with the hoist to keep it upright, and I can get some stands in underneath, and now I'm heading for the back engine mounting, which also sends one arm over to the front of the bell housing and holds those two together. So just tighten up that one, and that was the bell housing one, and then there's 2 up there on the back of the engine block. So this one will slot into the cross member I was painting earlier. I need to take off that little front bracket in order to get the cross member. It has to go over an anti-roll bar, which is just out of view there. I'm glad I decided to do this while the radiator was out, because it made everything so much more accessible. And you know, when you're reaching down and doing bolts, you're always doing a little bit of wear on the fins on the radiator when you're moving around that area. So this is good. So this little subframe that holds on the lower arm, had to loosen that off. I'd obviously put that back on before to get the car rolling again, because I had it in and out of the garage during the last 2 years. That had to be loosened off, and the cross member goes in underneath it. You can see that's at the original level of muck and grease, and that shows you why this car was particularly well preserved underneath. Yeah, should give that a clean if I get a chance. so that was tightening the cross member to the body. This bolt shares the cross member and that little subframe. And then there's this tiny little block which I just slotted back on. That actually prevents the engine mounting, which slotted through the cross member, from tilting forward, and you couldn't drop it down through it while that block was in place, so I had to bolt that in. So now there's the large bolt which goes through that circular rubber mounting. Then there's just 2 more bolts on the front of the cross member into that lower front panel, and the engine is securely in place.
It's in. Chewie's got his engine back. I think I've got a moustache. Excellent.